Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is David Novak. Today I am doing the Nonfiction November book tag. Now, Nonfiction November is a booktube event, been going on about a decade, which encourages people to read nonfiction. Nonfiction is generally on my plate. This year I have not picked out anything special for the event, but I thought that I would do this tag. I was recently tagged by Aaron Facer at Aaron Facer, who did the tag. I will put a link to his video in the description box. Now, this is an original tag invented by Julie at Bookish Travels, and I will also put a link to her video in the description box. There are 9 prompts, but the 9th one is to tag other people, and being that November is about over, I will skip that one. If you would like to do this tag, consider yourself tagged, or if you do not have a booktube channel of your own and you would still like to participate, feel free to give me your answers in the description box. There are, as I say, 9 prompts. We will be considering 8 of them, and I will put these into the description box as well for your reference. I've said that I generally read nonfiction. That's been on my plate for a long time. It's only been in the last, say, 5 years or so that I've really been trying to read more fiction. So, number 1, what motivated you to pick up your first nonfiction book, and can you remember it? I believe that I can. Now, when I was a wee laddie, my mother brought into the house, I remember a big picture book about trains, and I remember one about trucks. So I had an early introduction to nonfiction. But on my own accord, in grammar school, there was a scholastic book club, and when the catalog came in, you could peruse it, make some selection, give the teacher your $2 or whatever it was back in the day. I mean, we're talking quite a ways back in the day. And a couple of weeks later, after you had forgotten about it, some books would come in. And I had a set of books. They weren't sold as a set, but they became a set for me. One pertaining to earthquakes, one pertaining to volcanoes. There were a couple of others of that ilk, but the earthquakes and the volcanoes really interested me most. And the reason I chose those was just because I was curious. Always a good reason for picking up a nonfiction book. How do you choose your next nonfiction read? Well, for me, I think when it comes to fiction, I am something of a mood reader, and I just read as my whimsy takes me. Sometimes I might have some kind of a goal, but for nonfiction, I am much more goal-oriented. This past year, I read The History of the United States by Henry Adams, and as a sequel to that, it's been in the works for over a year. In my mind, I mean, I plan starting January to read Francis Parkman's big history of the North American continent before the foundation of the United States. So this is the second volume of the Library of America set. As you can see, it's rather quite hefty. So my plan for that will be to put in a half hour every night or whatever. I'll count the numbers of chapters and do some fancy division, something like that. Recently, I have been reading the Harvard series of books on Imperial China. So the first was Qin and Han dynasties. Second was the Northern and Southern dynasties. China between empires, I guess. And then the third was the Tang Dynasty, China's Cosmopolitan Empire. As you can see, they are all three written by Mark Edward Lewis, and I've finished them and enjoyed them all very much. But I sometimes am a bit of a completist, so that is another reason. I've just finished those, and so next year I am going to continue with the series. There are 3 more books in this series, and they are, each volume is written by a different author, so I was a little hesitant about it, but now my completist urges have taken over, so I will probably take a stab at that next year. I've been reading The Literary Mind Carves Dragons, so I will continue with that. I've always been a fan of literary criticism. And serendipitously, I found Gary Will's book about Henry Adams and the making of America. I'm a little bit skeptical of this book as yet. I'm on the fence, let's say. But it was $4 at the warehouse of open books, and how could I pass it up? So I want to follow my reading of Henry Adams with this book, which is about Henry Adams. So in this case, it's not so much that I really want to read what Gary Wills has to say, but just as a continuation of my previous reading project. Number 3, do you take notes or annotate your nonfiction books? Generally not. It has happened. I don't write in the book, but sometimes if there's a subject that I really want to learn some specific thing about, I will have a notebook and I will take notes in there, but it's generally not something. Now, I've written one historical drama, a play pertaining to a historical event, and in that case, yes, I took notes. I've also tried and failed numerous times, and in those cases, yes, I would have a dedicated notebook and take a lot of notes. Number 4, have you read a nonfiction book that has challenged your beliefs and assumptions? And indeed, I have. The winner in that category would be the book I read about last year at this time, Entangled Life by Merlin Sheldrake. I don't have the copy at hand to show you. It has gone around BookTube quite a bit. And really last year was my first year trying to get back into a little bit of science reading, and it opened up a lot of windows in my mind. I tend to be fairly binary. I think that you have a choice between McDonald's and Burger King. Turns out you have other options out there. Well, I always considered life to be divided. Either you have animals or you have plants. Well, it turns out that life is more copious than that, more varied than that. I never knew. So this sort of binary is useful in terms of creating intellectual constructs. You have hot and cold, but then when you delve in, I only found out recently that while heat exists, cold does not exist. The bifurcation of food into vegetables and fruits is very convenient, but I don't think that it's as clear-cut as that. And we all know by now that sex is not male or female. It's a little bit more complicated than that, although as a political agenda, there are folks that want to reduce it to that. Number 5, how do you feel about the intersection of storytelling and factual content in nonfiction. I don't particularly care for the storytelling aspect. So last year I read a book by Cy Montgomery about octopuses. And mostly it was anecdotal. It talked about going to Mexico, I think Mexico, on a scuba diving expedition, what the preparation was necessary for that, how to put on the gear, how to accustom yourself to being in the water for a length of time, and all of that. Not so interesting to me. I wanted to find out about octopuses. And then, of course, it was what it's like to visit an aquarium. What are people like that visit aquariums? Do you sometimes see children looking at the glass pane behind which you have the animals housed, so forth? Not a real interest to me. I've been to aquariums myself, so I've seen some of that. I really wanted to learn about the octopus or the octopuses. It's not octopi. And that was really a slim portion of the book, unfortunately. Now, I also read Braiding Sweetgrass, which is another combination memoir slash a little bit of science thrown in. And that one I would say I liked a little bit better. The memoir was more of a feature, and it was hard reading until I got to the audiobook, and then I appreciated the author's nuance. But generally speaking, I just want the facts, ma'am. I don't want the story about what it was like going there, but it's not a hard and fast rule. Is there, number 6, is there a topic you wish authors would explore? Can't think of any. If there is such a topic, a quick Google search will most likely reveal to me that somebody already has written such a book. So it's not something that I am too worried about. Number 7, do you incorporate insights from nonfiction into your daily life? And that I certainly do, just in terms of if I happen to remember any little facts, something will play around in my mind. And so even say with Cy Montgomery, perhaps if I go to an aquarium in the near future, which I have not been to an aquarium since I read that, I might notice something and then do something based on something that I had read. The most life-changing example of such a thing happened. I mentioned this in a different tag a while back. I read an essay by Michael Ventura in which he said, when you are driving your car, drive for distance, not for speed, meaning give yourself distance between you and the car in front of you. Do not make speed your goal. And he was pretty thorough in his reasoning, and I thought about it and said, sounds like a good idea. And ever since then, I have put speed out of the goal list when I'm driving a car, and I always give myself a lot of distance between me and the car ahead of me. A very reasonable thing to do. Number 8, choose just one book from your nonfiction collection to highlight. And I will choose The Assassination of Fred Hampton. I've looked for this book on other occasions, and it turns out I had it misfiled, so I thought I would bring it up now. Fred Hampton was a Black Panther in the Chicago land area, and more than 50 years ago, he was assassinated, murdered by the Chicago Police Department in conjunction with the FBI. The Black Panther Party did a lot of good deeds in the city. It was a social service organization. They provided food for kids and that kind of thing. Really a positive organization in the history of the city. And the powers that be, I think even, what was that guy's name? I keep thinking Edgar Rice Burroughs, but no, it's J. Edgar Hoover, did not like that. And so he was killed. Not nearly enough has been written about him. So this kind of goes back to that other question. There is only this one book. To my mind, it leaves a lot unsaid. I would like to see a lot more books written about this case. I have questions, for example, the building in which he was assassinated, along with a guy named Mark Clark, I think, it was subsequently taken down. After their deaths, the neighborhood came in and viewed the crime scene, which is how I'm referring to what the Chicago police did. Bullets went into the apartment, but no bullets came out of the apartment. And that was clearly demonstrated and blew the story given by the government, blew it to pieces. And as I say, the neighborhood paraded through the apartment and saw all the evidence for themselves. I could easily see it having become a pilgrimage shrine. You can't find anything out about when the building was demolished, why it was demolished, that kind of thing. I would be very curious to know. So there's a lot that needs yet to be said. In a world replete with injustices, this is only one, but it happened in my backyard, so to speak. I was living at the time, just a babe in, I don't know what. I was a babe in something living in the suburbs, and I'm sure that his death was roundly applauded by folks in my neighborhood. As I say, in retrospect, you learn things, and so I would like more attention shined upon this case. So, as I say, the next prompt is to tag some people. I will forego that. If you would like to do it, please do, as I said at the top. I would like to thank Julie for creating this tag, and thank you, Aaron, for giving me a little extra shove to do this tag. I should add, just as a closure, this video is going to be posted on Black Friday, a big sales day in the United States, and Lulu.com, the site where my books are listed available for purchase, is having a 30% off sale. That kind of thing happens once a year if you're lucky. So it's really the ideal time to pick something up. Only one of those titles is nonfiction. I don't especially recommend that. The bulk of it is poetry. There is one play as well. So I will put a link in the description box so that you can check out what there is if you are still in time watching this video to catch that sale. Thank you very much for stopping by my channel.